Hello, friends, and welcome to Bishop's Lodge. Let me wish you a happy Easter. The sermon today is from the Gospel reading for the day, which is John chapter 20, from verse 19 to the end. It's a very familiar story, and for that reason it's easy to skate over it because we've heard it all before. Thomas, doubting Thomas. He's missed out on the appearance of Jesus in the locked room, and he's not willing to believe what he hasn't seen. And Jesus, on his next appearance, convinces Thomas, and then he points beyond Thomas to those like you and me who have never seen Jesus in the flesh and who still believe in him. And I wonder, as you look again at this story, what you make of it and what you make of Thomas. How does he figure in your mind? Do you see him as doubting Thomas? Do you see someone who's a weak believer who can only be convinced by the evidence of his eyes? Perhaps he's just jealous that he wasn't in the room when Jesus appeared and blessed his friends. In fact, of course, we've come across Thomas before in John's Gospel, chapter 11, where we read the story of the death of Lazarus. That's in the context of growing conflict around Jesus and his ministry, when the disciples were not entirely sure that they would be safe if they set out. And from verse 14, here's how the story unfolds. Then Jesus told them plainly, it says, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, he says, I'm glad I was not there so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. Not a story of doubt, but a story of courage. Courageous Thomas, not doubting Thomas at all. But we know both those things about Thomas. He would not believe, and he was full of strength and courage. And it's interesting that in both those references, St. John wants us to know that Thomas was called the twin. I don't know if you know the statue in Hope Street, Liverpool City, made by Stephen Broadbent, the statue of Bishop David Shepherd and Archbishop Derek Warlock. It was commissioned by the Liverpool Echo and paid for by the people of Liverpool who wanted to thank God for the memory of those two men. They stand like a couple of gates, two people facing each other. But as my friend, the Archbishop, present Archbishop of Liverpool, Archbishop Malcolm, as he says, if you look carefully, you'll see on the pavement there's a third circle. Each of the bishops and archbishops stands in the circle. There's a third circle, which is where you're meant to stand. You can stand there and you can interact with the memory of these two men whose friendship meant such a lot to the city. And I wonder, in the same way, whether we can stand in a circle facing Thomas who's called the twin, and learn from him. The Bible is very concerned to know that Thomas was a twin. In fact, the word Thomas itself means twin, but he's also known as a twin. In other words, it's twin, known as a twin. It's never spelled out why this is important to the writer of the Gospel, and we never find out who Thomas's twin was. Some people have speculated that maybe his twin was Jesus himself, but I'm not convinced by that. To me, the main thing is that Thomas was a twin, and I don't know who his twin was, because if I don't know, it makes me ask the question, maybe I could be his twin. Nancy Rockwell says this, and I'm quoting Nancy. Thomas is a Greek name and it means twin, though his twin, if he had one, never appears. And some suggest we are each of us his twin because each of us has our nagging doubts that sometimes prompt us to get up and investigate a situation, sometimes hold us back. Thomas's doubts are the most persistent, then he is our twin, because sometimes our own doubts persist. and at times they are insistent. And they do have the ability, she says, to lead us to new discoveries about ourselves and our relationship with all that is holy. My doubts, she says, are not so much about whether Easter happened, but about whether it's important, whether it has anything to do with me. After all, she says, it is from my own suffering that I long to rise. In other words, here's a woman who finds in the story of Thomas and his own doubts and his own strength, finds there the way in which we can live in the strength and the power of Easter, but also facing a world such as we've all had to face in this last year, full of isolation and sometimes fear and often uncertainty. I'm moved and inspired by these words of Nancy Rockwell in this age of the coronavirus. Under the pressure of lockdown and uncertainty, I ask God for the grace to be courageous. And as part of the courage, not to be afraid of doubt, so that in both these ways I can be Thomas's twin. Another American writer, Anne Lamott, she said this: the opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty. Certainty is missing the point entirely. In other words, she says, if we're living in an uncertain world, our faith can help us with that, because we walk by faith and not by sight. Easter is the season of light and hope beyond death and darkness. And I pray for you and for all of us who are Christians, that like Thomas we can be courageous but also honest, trusting in the uncertain future, wise in uncertain times. May God bless you, friends, this Eastertide with the love that casts out all fear, the love of the risen Jesus whom we cannot see, but in whom we believe. I'm going to end with a poem. It's written by Sidney Carter. His most famous work, of course, was that hymn, The Lord of the Dance, and he knew about dancing. But he wrote another poem, and its name was Doubt Is. And he describes our life as if it's lived not by standing on a rock, but by standing in a ship on a deck which moves to and fro. And how that by that moving, we're also able to dance. In this Eastertide, as we face the coming through and hopefully coming out of lockdown, as we continue to face uncertainty, as we continue to call on our courage and our honesty, I pray this poem for you and for everybody in the diocese, we who ask God for the bigger church to make the bigger difference. And I pray that you may be blessed in your courage and in your questioning and in your lives, and that you may dance courageously with Thomas, your twin. Doubt is. Doubt is what you drown in or walk upon. The solid deck is never really solid. Singing a carol round the Christmas tree, you can forget that you are floating. But the ship is not rock-bottomed. All the while you walk upon the water. I will love this dark and downward-pulling angel, doubt, whom I could never learn to dance without. God bless you.